Okay, thank you very much. Did you hear that beep, Susan?
Yes, I did.
Good, excellent. I see who it is. Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is John Harris. I am the co-chair of Climate Action Brookline. Would like to invite or welcome, I should say, everybody to the meeting tonight. This is the first of, we hope, many communication and coordination meetings between different environmental groups in town. And I want to apologize in advance. There are tons more groups that do work related to climate. And I just didn't want to overload the agenda, to be honest with you. 2 months ago, our candidate meeting, we had only one select board candidate and one school committee candidate, just 2 speakers, and it was a phenomenal meeting. I think everybody would agree on that. So we wanted to give everybody enough space. What we're going to do with the speakers, each speaker will have a time. Boy, that bell in my ear is a little distracting. Oh, well. We'll have time for a brief set of remarks, basically talking about what each group or each person's immediate priorities are, number one, and then what structures or committees or actions or whatever are either in existence or planned in order to make that priority a reality. So I expect that the speakers total will be maybe about a half an hour or something like that. And then that will give us a full hour of free ranging question and answers. And please save your questions, except for Wendy, who will have to leave very soon to get her kids, give her kids dinner, but have spoken.
I'm okay.
So,
I can stay. They're out.
They're okay. Very good. Good solution. Okay. And the order of speakers, we're going to have Climate Action Brookline first, Susan Martin, and then myself, and then Wendy on Power D, which many people may not even know what it is. And then Brookline Sustainability Director, Tom Barrasso, and then Brookline Mothers out front, Ann Suddeth and Olivia Fisher-Fox. And then Brookline Elders Climate Action, Mayan Barron and Dan Rabinowitz. And then after that, Rabinowitz, and then after that, as I say, free ranging question and answers of everybody. And Wendy, are you saying the question should go after all the speakers? You're good on that? Okay, good. Okay, let's see. Okay, Susan Martin, talking about Climate Action Brookline.
Okay, so I am co-chair of Climate Action Brookline along with John Harris, and in my part of this, I wanted to just give you a little background about Climate Action Brookline. I know many of you know about Climate Action Brookline, but some of you may not. So this is just a brief introduction. We have a mission statement, which is to create a greener and healthier future by connecting Brookline citizens to ways they can reduce their carbon footprint at home, at work, and in the community. And as our name implies, we focus on climate. We try to get people and businesses and organizations to take action. And we focus on Brookline rather than the state of Massachusetts or the world. We've historically put most of our effort into the residential sector of town, as that's the largest contributor to Brookline's carbon footprint. And you'll see this pie chart it's 2008. So it's old, but it's the best we have at the moment, and probably pretty reasonably close to what it is now. CAB was founded in June 2000, and we became a 501c3 in 2011. In the past years, we've held a lot of events. We've canvassed a lot of homes to try to inform residents of ways they could reduce their carbon footprint. I'm just going to talk really briefly about some of our recent initiatives. One of them was Brookline Green Electricity Campaign. As I'm sure most of you know, Brookline has a community choice aggregation program for our electricity that most residents are on. And our effort was to try to get people on that program to opt up to 100% green electricity. We worked on that for quite a while, and we made a little progress, but not a lot. But it was a good effort, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Another thing we did was lobby for a full-time sustainability director for the town. We participated in the Climate is Everybody's Business project, which was led by David Gladstone. And the working team on that had members from Climate Action Brookline, from Mothers Out Front, representatives from Brookline small businesses and so forth. And our goal was to try to help businesses save money and save energy. We put together an ARPA proposal for an energy coach for Brookline small businesses, because one of the things we recognized was that there's a lot to know and people can really use help. And they can use help not only in understanding kind of where to find out information and how to go about it, but also just someone to sort of prod them to keep going. That was not funded in the first round, and it was submitted. It was submitted actually by Tom Barrasso's group in the town, which we were delighted with. We have written and submitted warrant articles over the years. Our members have, and one of them had Brookline become a supporter of the Paris Climate Agreement, which John will talk about a little bit more. We hold regular meetings with select board and school board candidates, as John mentioned, to learn about their positions on climate action, and those meetings are open to anyone who would like to attend. And we also have regular CAB meetings to review warrant articles that are related to the environment, and we decide which ones to endorse. And again, those meetings are open. So we're currently all volunteer run. During several years, we had a paid part-time campaign director. That was Mary Dewart, who I think is on this call. But funding was challenging and we decided we couldn't financially support the role. So now we are volunteer. We have 2 co-chairs, a treasurer, secretary, and a board that I'm listing there on the right-hand side. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. And we have monthly meetings, second Monday of every month, except for August. They're 5 p.m. on the second Monday of the month, and they're typically via Zoom these days or at Brookline Town Hall. And we have a monthly newsletter that we send out that has a mailing list of around 700 people. So, John, I turn it over to you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Let me just get to where, okay, I'm going to be very, very brief. And I'm going to give you really, I guess, two sets of numbers. And the first one is designed specifically to put the fear of God into everybody. And that is the number that was given to us, very simple mathematics, by Rich Rosen, who's a half the year Brookline resident, very active in CAB when he's here in town. And he's also a contributor to the IPCC report, the UN report that oversees the Paris procedure and all of that. And he pointed out that if we are going to get to net zero by the year 2040, if Brookline is going to get to net zero by 2040, Brookline has to reduce our greenhouse gases by 6% every year until then. That is a major reduction that continues for the next 18 years. Okay, now I'm going to say something controversial about that. I believe that the only progress we have made on that in the town of Brookline is through our Brookline Green Electricity Program, where so far in the 5 years it's been operational so far, we have reduced greenhouse gases by the equivalent of 10 to 13 large scale onshore wind turbines, or putting photovoltaic panels on 7,000 roofs. And if you have additional information to correct me on that is not the only way we've reduced greenhouse gases, by all means, let us all know in the Q&A sessions. We've been talking quite a lot at CAB about how to reduce that in a meaningful way. And we have been made very aware that there are 3 sectors of the Brookline and Massachusetts economies that account for a huge percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. And number 1, I'm going to give you the 2019 figures. There are different figures that give slightly different percentages, but this gives you the overall idea. In 2019 in Massachusetts, the transportation sector was responsible for 45% of greenhouse gases. The building sector, running, operating buildings, heating, cooling them, et cetera, lighting them, et cetera, 19%, and generating electricity, 18%. Those three sectors, just according to these numbers, account for a total of 82% of the greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. There's another source more recently that says those three sectors are about 95% of greenhouse gases in Massachusetts. So the whole idea here in Brookline is that we've got to have multiple projects, multiple objectives in those three areas to really meaningfully get to net zero. Okay, we certainly can have other goals, and that's fantastic, but we have to include multiple projects in those three areas. And then here's my final thing to talk about, which is in 2017, CAB sponsored a warrant article, very successful at town meeting, to have Brookline sign on to the Paris Climate Agreement. And then pursuant to that article, the next year, 2018, the Brookline Planning Department, led by Maria Morelli, wrote a updated climate action plan. And that was fantastic. But the next step for Paris is that they ask every signatory to update their climate action plan every 5 years. That means the next update, 2018 plus 5, is 2023, next year. So a major CAB priority for the coming year, and we're working very closely with Tom Barrasso on that, and hopefully with all of the rest of you, is to have a climate action plan update that will be 2 significant words. Number 1, comprehensive, meaning it'll cover all of the significant greenhouse gas and energy production, energy consumption areas that make a difference here, and that it will be what's called strategic. And those folks who know about the Collins Center report of a couple of years ago, that word strategic is magic, because what it means is that for every objective we set, we're going to have concrete procedures, concrete steps to reach that objective, and a concrete dates in terms of when each step will be accomplished, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so the climate action plan can be whatever we want it to be, and it should be as much as we can let it be, as much as we can work to make it be, with meaningful objectives for the town of Brookline, the Brookline town government. Hopefully meaningful objectives for residents of Brookline, perhaps the ideas and the education, et cetera, led by climate groups such as all of us here today, individual actions perhaps on the part of Brookline residents, and even as far as educational events for school kids in Brookline, down to all ages. So basically, that is, I guess I'd say, CAB's challenge to everybody in town. 2023 is next year. The challenge is for us to kind of get our act together and decide what we want the climate action plan to be. We can submit the climate action plan to the Paris people at any time next year, and it can be as complete as we want it to be. And again, our challenge is to make it as meaningful and comprehensive and strategic as we can. Now, that's the bulk of what I have to say for today. The one question that always arises in such a thing, it's arisen at every climate action plan we've had so far, is what should we be measuring, how to measure it, and then how to make use of that, of whatever data we do accumulate. And Mothers Out Front and ZEAB, Zero Emissions Advisory Board member Wendy Stahl, has been working on a project with a company called, well, it should be called Power D, but maybe it's not, but that's how it looks. And Wendy, I wonder if you could just tell us about that project.
Thanks, John. It's exciting to hear about the plans of CAB going forward. But as you mentioned, this new edition of the Brookline Climate Action Plan is going to be strategic, and it's going to have measurable goals, and we're going to need to have, like steps that we follow to make sure that we're reaching those goals. But how are we going to know that? Well, we have to look at how much gas and how much electricity we're actually using. So there's a software as service company that reached out to Brookline residents called Powered City. I have been calling it Power D, but I think they've called themselves Powered. And they have offered us a 6-month free pilot program to dig into our detailed utility use in this, so that we can actually have those numbers to track to see whether the changes we're making that we commit to in this future climate action plan, to see whether those changes are actually having the effect that we need them to have. Because if they're not, then we'll have that data and we can change course. So there will be a large kickoff meeting with the Powered City folks, and they're interested in having members of the community join that meeting and express their interest for what Powered City can provide to us, because they're going to create a software program that looks at all of our utility usage data for as detailed as the utility companies will give them, like possibly, I'm hoping, down to the individual building. But they want to know how we want to look at that information and how we're going to, like, what specific filters we want on it, and you know, what we're going to want to do with that information. So if anybody at this meeting or any of your friends want to be a part of that decision-making process, I'd be very excited to have you join me in this work. Thank you. You're muted, John.
Thank you very much. Wendy, do we have any idea when that kickoff meeting might be?
This summer, let's say June or July, but
okay.
It has yet to be scheduled.
And does the 6-month pilot period begin the date of the kickoff?
No, it is beginning now. They are going to start work trying to get data for us already, but the sort of like manipulation of that data will happen starting at that kickoff meeting.
And the sense I get of that group from when they presented at a ZIAB meeting is that these were very experienced individuals, but this was a new single company of those folks working together, and that they have offered this pilot to Brookline at no cost. And I think so we're their guinea pigs, so they can kind of get their act together to do this in other municipalities, perhaps worldwide, in the immediate future.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We are their guinea pigs. This is a
start. We're really
the second municipality for them. The first one was their own municipality.
Oh, and where's that?
North of us, somewhere in Vermont. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. They seem like a whole bunch of live wires. All right, our very next speaker is, CAB has worked for a very long time to get a professional sustainability director in the town of Brookline. And Tom Barrasso has now been in the town for, gee, Tom, I think it's just about a year and a month or something like that. And so yeah. Happy birthday. So this is fantastic. And Tom has been working very closely with CAB on different events. Tom worked, different projects, I should say. Tom worked very closely with the CAB BGE project in the last several months. And Tom, I wonder if you could just tell us what your, kind of short-term and immediate-term priorities are, and what your plans are to accomplish them.
Sure, thanks for having me. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you can.
Let's see if that will work. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. But I can't see it, so I'll wing it and as best we can. All right. So to date, we've accomplished quite a bit. I've been here like probably a year and a month or so, or a little bit more than that. But first thing I negotiated is a solar takeoff credits for Brookline. We're going to be getting $1.5 to $1.7 million that will be a benefit to our electricity bills through the town. But by building the solar facility in Sandwich, Mass, will also be allowing for 2,000 metric tons of greenhouse gases to be avoided. So there's a benefit across the board for both Brookline and Massachusetts and the utility grid. Rooftop solar projects, we assisted with some of the construction on that. Ridley, Runkle High School, Crane, the MSC, and the Heath project slightly delayed because of some supply chain issues. Each one of those will have about a 20-year life cycle, again, generating quite a bit of electricity for the grid and offsetting another 23,000 tons of greenhouse gases. As you mentioned, the BGE project, we got that signed again. We've got a new 2-year contract with Nextera that begins on January 1st, 2023. I won't go into the details on that. It's pretty complicated, and I think everybody here was pretty well versed in it. Assisted in the sustainability planning for the US Open, which I think is just underway. So that will be a pretty massive event for Brookline. And several projects that will be legacy projects will come out at the other end of that. What they will do at the very end for their sort of additional carbon neutrality, we'll have to wait and see once they collect their data. But we will be getting 122 trees under the urban forest plan. We're going to be doing some eco restoration at the Putterham Golf Course and the restoration of Lost Pond. One of the bigger things that comes out of that, I think, is the rapport we now have with the sustainability group at the country club, where I think there's going to be some additional support that we can do, especially with regards to resiliency and stormwater, as stormwater comes from their end of the country club and then ends up on Putterham and then forward into the rest of Brookline. I did a major review of every single capital improvement project and introduced a sustainability filter with Melissa Goff into that project or into that review process, which I think will be much stronger on the next go around, the next time we try that. So looking forward to doing that again. Grant wins to date, I pulled in some small amounts of money, $35,000 from DOER to evaluate our green community data that we've got, very similar to what Power City or Power D City will be doing. MAPC, we've got a regional energy planning grant for about $5,000 that hasn't kicked off yet. Another DOER grant for 2 EVs, which will be in the DPW department, and 1 dual level 2 charger, which will be somewhere in the town hall campus area. Again, my areas of focus when I first sat down, Allison Steinfeld, the then director of planning, asked me to come up with some areas of focus. Looking at the climate action plan, municipal energy reduction, trying to reduce our own energy footprint, internal electrification across the board, stormwater resiliency, transportation, and the building code. Made some progress on pretty much each one of those. Stormwater resiliency is a lot of discussions, but nothing really concrete yet. And building code, learning quite a bit about what they're doing in both Cambridge and Boston, and hopefully we'll be able to adapt that to what we want to do in Brookline, which is actually called out in the original 2018 climate action plan. So for near term, the next year or so, the update to the climate action plan that John mentioned, I've applied for a municipal vulnerability preparedness grant that will help us do that somewhere between $85,000 and $100,000. Our goal will be to integrate our climate emergency warrant article 37 and the updates that we need to do, as John mentioned, as the regular sort of Paris Accord, and also integrate across other departments. So hopefully we will get that money. If we do not, we'll have to rethink it and figure out how we can do that internally. We have to integrate our hazard mitigation plan into the climate action plan. That has to be done. In fact, we will be having a kickoff for that probably in August as the other events sort of die down and we can sort of stay focused on that. There is a new emergency management coordinator, Cheryl Snyder, and we've been working pretty closely to sort of figure this out. She's got a grant already in place that has a consultant already sort of baked into the process. And we'll be kicking that off, like I said, hopefully in August. I would like to develop a comprehensive municipal fleet electrification plan. I've been trying to figure out how to do that for the last few months. And there's been some work already been done by DPW and facilities and trying to integrate sort of what they've already done into some form of a master plan. There's some funding that I've got through the planning department, which I hopefully can bring on either ICF or Stantec or another consultant, maybe Weston Sampson, to sort of help us out with that. Examining building performance, both at the municipal level through the green community work and the Massachusetts Energy Insight database that I have access to, that we will give Power D access to as well. And externally through building energy use disclosure ordinances, which is what Boston and Cambridge are doing. I actually had a conference call with Cambridge this afternoon, and they're really making some strides on that way. And that's, again, part of our 2018 plan. So we need to figure out how to integrate that into our own regulatory process. I'm looking to expand our solar opportunities, both at the rooftop level. There's several other projects I would like to do. And one other project, I won't go into details yet. I've got a meeting on Wednesday about it. If it looks like it's going to be able to be done, I will come back and brief you on that. And I'd like to realign our municipal energy load contracts. We negotiated those the moment I arrived. It was literally the first couple of days that I got into my desk. And at that point, we were shooting for 100% renewable under those contracts at 2050. We would like to bring that back. I think we can actually accomplish that much in the same way that we did with the BGE contracts, either immediately or pretty close to it. So we really need to look at those again. Critical elements moving forward into the future. Obviously, we're going to get a new town administrator, so that's going to be critical. The Commonwealth is going to change its leadership, both at the governor level. We've already seen the head of Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs depart, and I'm sure everything there is kind of in stasis until somebody else comes on board. So I'm not looking for new programs to be developed until we do have a new governor and a new executive branch controlling those actions. Local and regional efforts, the MAPC and the Charles River Watershed, I've been meeting with them regularly to see things about heat island effects, things we can do with stormwater, other things we need to do on the resiliency end of things. Funding opportunities at local, state, and federal levels. Obviously, if there's more ARPA money coming, we will put in again for the second round of ARPA money for the energy coach. I think we were precluded just because I think the costs were a little high for, I think it was 300 grand over the space of several years, which seemed pretty reasonable to me. Looking at integrating with the rest of the departments, which is an ongoing process. I've been here a year and a half and still trying to get everybody's attention. We've got a new zero waste coordinator, and we've got, again, new full-time emergency management coordinator. So trying to coordinate across all of those departments. And I think we're going to hold the questions for the end. So that's my update for now. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Our next group of speakers are from Brookline Mothers Out Front, Ann Sudduth and Olivia Fisher Fox. What are your current top priorities and how are you intending on making them a reality?
I think we might need Tom to stop sharing his screen before we can share ours.
Yes, and I'm figuring that out as fast as I possibly can. It seems to have disappeared from my menu. Ah, there we go. Got it.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much, John, for giving us this opportunity to talk. I'm Ann Sudduth. I'm the co-coordinator of Brookline Mothers Out Front, and I thought we would just share some general information about our group before we dive into our 3 current campaign teams. We're not going to talk about historical accomplishments. We're really focused on what we're doing now and going forward, so you guys can get a sense of that. So that was direction from John yesterday. So our vision is to achieve a livable climate for all children. And we are a local chapter of a national organization with a large presence in Massachusetts. Across the country, a common theme is that we're all working for a swift and equitable transition off of fossil fuels. And I'll give you a sense of our chapter. We call this the wheel, and it just graphically explains how our chapter is organized. Our team has grown significantly over the last 2 years, and we have a lot of exciting projects underway. So I'll tell you more about that. Right now, we have 3 campaign teams: fossil fuel free, trees, and then zero waste and compost. And we'll share a bit more about these in a minute. We have, as I mentioned, a large group. Our chapter is open to everyone. Quite a few of our members are not parents, but the group is primarily composed of women. I like to describe us as an army of informed doers. We really appreciate connecting with one another. We have fun with each other, and building community is really important to all of us. But if we have an orientation, I would say it's very much around action. Keep going. If people wanted to get involved, there are many ways to do so. We have monthly brunches, monthly campaign team meetings, weekly Zooms, and all sorts of statewide opportunities as well. New faces are always welcome at our monthly brunches. You can see some of the upcoming dates right here, and it's easy just to RSVP on our website. On Thursdays, you can always drop in to join us for coffee and collective action. It's a chance to learn, connect, and then take a quick action on a different climate issue each week. And we can add the RSVP links into the chat later. You can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then if you are a member of our group, you can also join our members only Facebook group. So now I'm going to switch to talking about our campaign teams. There's Mayim. And we have lots of people like Mayim and Susan who join our group and are human bridges and collaborators across organizations, which we love. So our first is fossil fuel free. We advocate, as I said, for a swift and equitable transition off of fossil fuels. And that means that our work is really supporting the state's legislative efforts around net zero emissions by 2050, as well as really supporting the specific goal of electrifying 1 million homes by 2030. And we also have some of our history is really around gas leaks. So you may have heard us kind of hammering home that we want to fix the largest and most dangerous gas leaks. And we call that triage and transition. So as part of that switch to electrifying 1 million homes, we are in Brookline focused on decarbonizing our homes. So we present these workshops on Zoom to neighborhood organizations, faith communities, really any groups that's interested in learning how to be part of this transition. So if you're part of a group and you are interested in initiating that and hosting us, we would love to come. Just let me know. Switching to induction cooking is part of how we're going to make this transition, and we've donated induction cooking kits to several of the Brookline libraries, Coolidge Corner, and Putterham. There's Inga, who's been a longtime board member for CAB, who's been spearheading that effort. So we encourage you to take those out of the library. Brookline has over 20 large gas leaks, and you've probably smelled them. Statewide, those big gas leaks represent about 7% of the gas leaks across the state, but 50% of the emissions. So we're not only pushing National Grid to fix the leaks, but we're also trying to raise awareness of the public health and climate risks associated with them. And then last, for my part, we do participate in a statewide campaign called Clean Heat, Clean Air that is focused on, again, on getting us off of gas. And we support that locally. And there's opportunities. Just this week, we're doing a phone banking on Thursday and a climate action call statewide on Thursday. And now I'm going to switch it over, I think, to Olivia.
Yeah, and great. And can you advance the slides for me, Anne?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you, Anne. I'm Olivia Fisher-Fox, and I'll be talking about the 2 other campaigns we're working on in addition to fossil fuel free. And those are the tree campaign and the zero waste campaign. So first, the tree campaign. This is a campaign that works in partnership with the town to support the goals of Brookline's Urban Forest Climate Resiliency Master Plan. We promote Brookline's front yard tree planting program to get more trees planted in town. And I'll give you a taste of what we accomplished this year, much of which we will be doing again in the upcoming academic year. Next slide. We developed promotional materials in collaboration with the town. Next slide. We gifted a copy of A Forest in the City to every children's library in Brookline. Each copy includes a book plate that directs the reader to Brookline's front yard tree planting program. Next slide. Then we put our materials to work at events such as Springfest, a tree canvassing event, and we expanded our gift of a forest in the city to every free little library in Brookline. Next slide. And lastly, our third Brookline campaign team is Zero Waste and Compost. This is a large and vibrant team with an evolving set of projects. Right now, we're working to support school-based and curbside compost, as well as a green grocer campaign. Next slide. Each week, Mothers Out Front volunteers to help students at the high school and sort their compost waste at lunch. We're always looking for new volunteers to engage with the kids. So email Dean Cody if you or someone you know is interested. This is actually a lot of fun. In addition, we partner with the town's Zero Waste team to promote curbside compost and plan for its expansion. Universal curbside compost is the dream. Next slide. The Green Grocer campaign is a pilot in partnership with the Conservation Law Foundation. If you're like us, you wish your market made it easier to shop in a low zero waste way, for example, providing compostable bags, bulk or unpackaged items. Next slide. Check out the Brookline Mothers Out Front webpage on zero waste to do a deep dive on key zero waste topics. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about these informative articles. Next slide. So thank you again for this opportunity to tell you about our organization. If you'd like to get involved, to fill out the sign up form on our website or email us at the address on this slide. And I guess we're doing questions at the end. So.
Yeah, and I'm just going to give a shout out to Wendy because Wendy's the other co of the Zero Waste and Compost team listed here, and also the author of many of those amazing articles about zero waste that's on our website.
Fantastic. And I and a few of the rest of us were also at the MOF brunch yesterday, and it was a phenomenal event. It was very fun and also very informative and very kind of inspirational. So, and I want to thank the organizers of that event. It was great. Our next speakers are the folks from Brookline Elders Climate Action, and that would be Mayim and Dan.
All right. Well, I'm just so in awe of Mothers Out Front and that brunch yesterday. You guys are just doing such great work, and that this meeting is about how we can work on some of these projects together. I'm already so excited to get into that part of our time that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on what ECA is about. I think most people here know something about it. I'll fill you in a little bit. And we'll just bring you up to date on what we've been doing. But basically, as you probably know, whereas one thing I love about Mothers Out Front is they're all ages, but they do mobilize these younger women who have a lot of energy. Elders Climate Action is the elders. You know, we meet during the day because we don't want to drive around in traffic and stuff like that. So we're really going for that older group of the population who's basically retired and like, what am I going to work on now that really matters? So that's, you know, the basics of what we're about. We see ourselves, I think, as two-pronged, an educational organization and an advocacy organization. And I'll try to give you a few examples of both of those areas we work in. Educational, we have a research team where people can get involved in whatever your topic is, EVs, composting, and develop presentations that then we do at our deep dialogues once a month, or at our chapter meetings once a month. We'll cover a topic like that. The chapter meetings, however, also get a lot into our legislative advocacy, because we've found that our senators and representatives are really getting to know us and they want to come talk to us. And when we have somebody like Senator Barrett, who's coming to our deep dialogue at the end of this month on the 27th, all of a sudden we get twice as many people who want to be in that Zoom and have a chance to talk to Senator Barrett. So I think a lot of our work the last few years has been developing those relationship with our representatives, you know, at the local level and at the state level. Now, ECA is part of a national organization, but We don't get into national policy work. The national organization can do that, and we're part of that. But we're working in Massachusetts and in various localities. We have about 1,100 members across the state who get our monthly newsletter. Over 400 of them are activists, people who show up at our meetings, the educational meetings we have, or the action meetings that we have. And, I think we've all gotten a lot better over the last year at targeting our letters, doing these letter writing campaigns, phone calling campaigns. So it's exciting to be at this point where we're coming together and we're going to be able to do that force multiplier thing, where we're coordinating our letter writing maybe and our phone campaigns. We'll see what we come up with, but you can tell I'm excited about that. So we do actioners too. We use the Climate Action Now app for some of that. But I love it how our representatives will want to come talk to us. So I want to screen share a little bit.
You
Let me see if
can, go ahead.
Okay, this is going to get us to something that's not really what I want to show you. This is in the way of what I want to show you. Okay, here's our website. Make that bigger. I'm sorry. I screwed up. I'll have to get that back. I don't know if I can do that now.
Oh,
I
well.
guess I have to. Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
Mayim, don't worry, I'm a digital dinosaur. You're,
Okay, I'll just go back to my notes. I'll forget about the screen sharing. Maybe I'll when Dan talks a bit, I can get it back up.
okay.
We're also related to working at getting out the elder climate activist vote through the Environmental Voter Project. I think in these days of voter rights and all that, that's very important. So, we've been working with that for a few years and we have really built up that muscle of how that works. And that's an ongoing project. What we're looking at now with our research team, I told you how people can develop whatever their area is on that. We've got the legislative team, the education team working on that. We're thinking about, we need to organize a new group, get the mechanisms in place for what we're going to call the super activists, the people that when we call them or we send out our action alerts, we know they're going to make the calls or send those letters. So that's kind of the edge on what we're looking at developing right now. We're going to be looking at how do we support the new governor and lieutenant governor who come in, and we probably will have some relationships with legislators to renew or, build some new ones. So I want to mention again our deep dialogue at the end of the month with Senator Barrett. I'm going to get that stuff back up on the screen and I'll show it to you. But can I ask Dan to step in for a minute and talk about our legislative priorities? And Dan, I'll try to get that back up on the screen so I can show it. Okay. So Dan is also an active member of Elders Climate Action. Inga's partner, David Damler, is very active in the group. And there's so much overlap between, who are the environmental activists in Brookline. I think we're really ready for this conversation about how we can work together.
So Mayim, even without having her, illustrations that she wants to show us all. But even without that, she's done a pretty thorough job of capturing what the Elders Climate Action Massachusetts is doing or trying to do. And in the interests of not bogging us down and letting us get to the question section, I'm not going to say a whole lot more other than definitely a big focus for us is legislative action and, trying to put in place the kinds of policies and programs at the state level that will help us to get to our critical goals. I will add that, while we have been very much about developing relationships with state reps and state senators, who, particularly those who are taking leadership on climate, it's, as I'm sure everyone on this call understands, it is a balancing act, because certainly there are times when we are pushing for more than particular state reps or state senators are pushing for. And I will say that, I think we're very aware of that and working on, trying to find that right balance, but feeling positively about what we've accomplished in the last year or two. So sorry for my comments not being more organized, but fortunately we had Mayim first. Oh, just one, when we get to questions, one question I had is just if it's possible to access or receive the various materials that people brought today, because I have to say I'm just really impressed with the presentations of a lot of the folks today.
Sure, we can make all that available. Maya, I'll tell you, you had your list of ECA list of state priorities, and one thing I have noticed, let me just comment very briefly, is that it just, in my experience with ECA, and I've attended several meetings over the last several months, one thing is that many of the speakers are subject matter experts about subjects that maybe they're retired now, but they worked in that very area for decades, and they were often leaders in their, state department, state government department that was working on that. For example, a couple of months ago, there was a person talking about trees and the positive impact of trees on, on the climate, and the kind of challenges to trees, especially out at the Wendell State Forest and places like that. And that person was fantastic, had been a many decades long person in that very department. And I've seen that at many of these meetings, these people, the ECA presenters really, really know what they're talking about. So Mayim, if you don't mind, you had your legislative priorities. If we could just kind of take a look at those super quick.
Oh,
They're
I
on the
had them
screen.
back up, but so I can go back to that, but there
Okay.
are recordings of our past meetings. Some of those, I mean, they were great you could call them webinars on their own. Yeah, if you want to look at the priorities, I can do that again. I love showing people around the website so you can see what's here.
Yeah.
So there they are again. We have gotten really involved with the tree thing through Save Mass Forest and Restore and the Wendell Forest people. So, we circulate their petitions. Also, there's a calendar here. Let me show you. Okay. There is not so much in June as there has been, like, Earth Day month. The calendar was just full, but we do put meetings on here for all kinds of other groups that we're allies with. I mean, we feel like working with our allies is an important part of what we do. So we love Mothers Out Front, the League of Women Voters, the Environmental League of Massachusetts, 350 Mass. So we'll put up events for all those groups so that all our members across the state can find them here. I just want to take another minute to show you our Facebook page also. And it looks like this. And I don't know, I guess because I signed out, we got this other garbage coming up. But we have some very well curated articles on the Facebook page. So that's always fun to look at. People do look at it very regularly. And we also have our events on the Facebook page too. it's not going to let me get to it from whatever strange state I'm in here now, but the events are on there too. So I encourage you to take a look at those. Just, you can see what's going on with environmental groups all around through that too. Okay, I think that's all we have to say about ECA. Like I said, we're here for this conversation we're going to have about how
Okay.
we can work together on trees and green energy and all that.
Okay, let me mention one final thing about ECA, which is the next ECA meeting I know about, and I intend to be there, is the ECA Massachusetts monthly meeting dealing with state and federal legislation. And Maya, will certain state legislators actually be there at that meeting?
Yes. Let me get back to where we were at on that. Tomorrow we have Tammy Govea coming, which is pretty cool. She is running for lieutenant governor. Tammy Govea and okay.
And that's tomorrow, 12 noon to 2 p.m.
That's right. Paul Mark talking about the green bank idea,
Okay.
which is not something we've heard a lot about so far. That's like funding for projects that we want to do. So that's going to be Rep. Paul Mark talking about that tomorrow.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, all the speakers. And let's just throw it out right now. Anybody having any questions for any of our speakers? All questions are welcome. Olivia.
I want to talk about the intersection of the energy coach proposal that CAB put out, that Susan drew up. Tom was involved in that, and as he said, it didn't get funded. And I want to talk about it because yesterday at the Mothers Out Front meeting, where you guys asked the great question, what are the obstacles that are keeping you from weatherizing your home or getting those heat pumps? The need for an energy coach kept coming up, that people still don't know everything they need to know to make those decisions, or they feel like they're stuck making those decisions. They want to talk to people who've done it. They want to get recommendations for who can help them. That's what we're talking about, is an energy coach. That's why we need that. So I was really glad to hear Tom say we're going to put that up again for more funding, because I think that's so where we could all work together and get behind that and really benefit from that.
Mhm. To follow
Let me
up, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, Olivia, one sec, just about the energy coach, just in case anybody missed it. The energy coach proposal that Susan Martin and the Climate and Everybody's Business people proposed for the first round of ARPA funding, it didn't make it in that round, and it's going to be reproposed in the second round. And yeah, at the MOF brunch yesterday, there was an awful lot of the discussion groups talked about the wisdom of an energy coach program. So, Olivia, question
Yeah,
or
sort of
comment?
following up on that,
Yeah, perfect.
it was really great, Tom, to hear your presentation from the town's perspective, and it was the first I've heard of a lot of these things that are happening. And I'm just wondering if there's a place that we could go to see, what you're doing or what's going on, so that I'm not relying solely on a CAB event that might include you. Is there
Just
another
wrote-
way to find
yeah.
out what's going on at the town level?
I just wrote myself a big note. We need a website. And again, not that I'm that digital uncouth, but the website building and website upkeep and whatnot is definitely not one of the things I do. So yeah, we definitely need to figure out how to get the word out more and make sure that all the things that we're making progress on are out there, or the things that we need collaboration on. If we can't get funding through ARPA for the energy coach, we may need to rethink that. And if we need to rethink that, we may need to go old school and try to think of some form of a clearinghouse. And maybe we can set that up through CAB or through Mothers Out Front or through some sort of consortium, where if we've got somebody identified who can talk some of this stuff through, that we can provide some input to. The tricky part is you guys can access information from vendors, that we can't really do as the municipality, because we can't put our seal of approval on it unless we go through this enormous process, and sometimes there's problems with that. But maybe we need like an Angie's list of sort of environmental things that we do that we could run at sort of the grassroots level, and see if we can get recommendations of people who are doing these things in their home, and get that information.
Susan, can you clarify the question in the chat that I asked about whether or not the ARPA funding is just for small businesses? Because I think at the Mothers Out Front lunch brunch, people were really focused on residential support or
Right. There's nothing I'd like more than to have a residential energy coach, but the ARPA proposal is for coaches for small business. And the reason is because ARPA funding is directed in that way to try to help individuals and organizations and businesses to recover from the negative effects that they had during COVID. So it was proposed as a way for them to save energy and save money, right? And therefore be in a better position as small businesses in town to be successful. So
do we have any idea how Newton has their funding for their energy coach program?
They have a manager of the energy coach program, and the energy coaches themselves are volunteers. That's my understanding. They do have a website that I need to look at again, because they do. One of the things that they do is when people ask questions and they give answers, they put those answers out on the website so that others can take advantage of that knowledge as well.
Thanks.
But we just don't know how that manager is paid, I guess, at this point. That'd be a very interesting question.
The manager is a town employee. We do know that.
Wow. Is that a full-time position or?
I believe so.
Wow. Wow. That I'll tell you what, Tom, that is a perfect opening. You are right now a one-person department, sustainability division in the town of Brookline. But I happen to know from previous communication that you had specific ideas for expanding the department, and you had people with specific new focuses. And I wonder if you could just tell us about those.
Sure. When I came in, I think, again, within the first week or so, I had proposed sort of a 3 or 4 person team to join me, one of which would be sort of a community coordinator on the environmental justice front to make sure that we get that really covered well, and would serve as a good coordinator to interact with all these various groups. Somebody who has building envelope experience, possibly a certified energy manager. That person actually could serve as the energy sort of coach manager. That would be a good way to do that. And then a couple of other things on the sort of financial side and just the sort of overall internal administration end of things.
And Tom, let me ask further. I just immediately before this, I was at a meeting where a senior group was talking about the Vision Zero program. And one of the things that was mentioned that was of great interest to me is that apparently the transportation department has a new, a person that will be working specifically on the Complete Streets issue and the Vision Zero issue. And those both have fantastic implications in the climate environmental fronts. And will you be coordinating with that person, or do you know any specifics about what that person is going to do? When that person might be hired, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I believe they're coming on pretty quickly. So, and I will coordinate as soon as I can. But, not to knock the municipality too much, but again, we're already been through year 1 and I still don't really have a budget or any staff. Not that you need, I don't need an army of people, but we definitely need some people to sort of help pick up the pieces, because I did kind of run around for the first year, kind of lighting as many fires as I could. And now I got to make sure that they're well maintained. So that's obviously a challenge.
I can tell you that every single meeting I go to, any town commission, committee, whatever, every single town department is asking, oh yeah, we'd love to do that, but we need more staff to do that. So yeah, So this year, the fantastic news is the transportation department got somebody new. Maybe we should all be advocating for somebody new, at least one. It was very hard, as cab people know, to get that single position that Tom has right now. It's fantastic we have that. Year by year, we can expand that if we keep advocating for that.
So just adding on about the ARPA proposal, the funding is mainly to hire someone as a contract person. So that is really the goal, is to be able to try to expand Tom's reach.
I believe that wasn't full-time, if I remember
That's
correctly.
right. It was not full-time.
Right, which negates a lot of the sort of benefit costs, which are usually the additional sort of general administration G&A costs that you have with another position. So that we thought was ideal. I think the feedback that I did get, not specifically to me, but the word I heard was that it was too expensive and there were other priorities. So, which again, I think it was 300,000 over.
It was 300,000, which seemed like a drop in the bucket.
Exactly, on other things that we were talking about. So
Yeah.
we'll
For
keep
3
pushing.
years, 300,000 over 3 years.
Susan, I'm sorry, Mary DeWart, yellow hand.
Yes, I'm wondering if we might consider a fundraising target, a goal to get an energy coach that could be affiliated with the town and affiliated with the planning department sustainability division. And we could possibly work with ZIAB on a united goal for all of our groups that could unify us in a project and help us probably raise some money. I don't know how much, but that might be a temporary stepping stone to a permanent position on some level, because ARPA funds would run out eventually too. So I'm interested in that.
Good idea. Ann Sudduth, yellow hand.
Thumbs up to Mary Dewart. Tom, I have a question, which is, you mentioned solar and rooftop solar, and I was curious if your focus was on municipal buildings or if you were also thinking about buildings, across the town and thinking more about a community solar type initiative. I know CAB was very involved in an earlier version of something like that.
Probably all. I mean, the easiest thing to affect and what I have sort of influence on is, of course, the municipal side of things. And I will bring up a topic. Again, I'm having a meeting. I think it's either Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So I don't know if this is even going to fly yet, but I will bring up the concept I have. Looking around, we don't have the land space to do solar. And I've constructed 2 large solar arrays in previous community that I worked in. Generating around 11 megawatts in totality and quite a bit of income for the municipality. So looking around to see where we've got some land space and what we could do that would be really innovative. And I came up with the idea of floating solar, a floating solar array. And the only body of water we have is the reservoir. So I am looking at that, whether or not the infrastructure actually exists. That's the biggest question that I hopefully will get an answer this week. If there's no place to get the power out and into the grid, then it's a done deal. You can't really move forward. If there is, then it becomes, okay, now how do we engineer this to sort of make it happen? And as far as I know, it's only being done in one other place in the Commonwealth, down on the Cape, I believe. So the same company is talking to me. We'd have to do some sort of RFQ because, again, there's money involved, but at least we get some technical answers, I hope, by the end of this week. So that's one area that I'm thinking of. The other is looking at every possible thing we can do for municipal buildings for solar. There you run into the issue where if it's not big enough, it doesn't become economically viable for the company. Who needs to put it up. If we need to do it, which a lot of facility folks in Brookline would rather own the thing outright, which is fine. But again, we're going to need the income stream or the budget resources in order to pull that off.
Tom, just, yes, I see there's a chat here from Maya. I was about to ask the same question. The standard thing that's talked about for PV arrays is in densely packed municipalities is canopies over parking lots. And is that something the town is looking into? And if not, let's do it, I think.
Yeah, we definitely are. And I think what we're waiting on is, again, anything that we're going to do to renovate or change those. So if there's plans to sort of do the parking lot over, to expand and contract it, do whatever they need to do, that's something that we are looking at in the future to sort of build into those plans. So I'm working pretty closely with Todd Corain in the transportation section of DPW. And once every 2 weeks, I'm on the phone with Todd, Kevin Johnson of DPW, and Eversource and National Grid on the utility side to talk about these projects.
Yellow hand, Brad Weitzman.
Yeah, when I look at a map, South Brookline has a lot of open space. I mean, Allendale Farm and Lars Anderson and the golf courses and so forth. Can't something be worked out with some of these venues to use some of that space for solar?
Yeah, I was sitting in my office with a giant map, and I was actually talking to another colleague, and we were looking at the farm. And I was trying to get, if you have somebody who you can make an introduction to me and whoever controls that real estate, please follow up with me, and I'd be happy to have that conversation, because community solar it might work in that regard. I tried to do some sort of farmland community solar maybe 2010 or so, and really got hammered down by Mass Department of Agriculture. So they may have changed over the last sort of decade or so, but definitely that would have a conversation again, because if that's an active working farm, they really fear losing a part of the farm. But you can do it in a way where you can still do your farming on the primary part of it, and you can do other things underneath the canopy. So if you can grow things that need a little less light, then that all works out in the long run for everybody. So there's definitely ways to do it. The golf courses are tough. I'm actually working with Lee Jackson on a number of different things that came out of sort of the evolution of our discussions and work with the golf tournament. And hopefully we can do something there. But the problem there is the golf balls. And so, putting up nets or shielding in some way really reduces it. So you don't have the kind of land space. And the country club is struggling with the same thing. But something needs to happen there. We need to figure out how to do it. The building space there is pretty small. So you can definitely probably electrify it. But again, it's going to be more of a cost to the town in terms of putting up an array versus something we can do on a large scale that would pay for itself.
Lars Anderson?
Lars Anderson, I don't know enough about. So, and I'm sure like the reservoir or some other areas that it's probably very sensitive to suggest something like that. I know in my last job in Amesbury, Mass, we had Woodson Farm, which was not a farm, it was just open space at this point. And that was looked at, but again, not something that we wanted to do.
Mary Duarte, yellow hand.
All right, I don't want to get bogged down, but Lars Anderson is on the National Register of and local Register of Historic Places, and is far too complex to consider as a solar array. But I think focusing on buildings, given even is a really important piece. And I think we can talk about solar on private. I don't know if the town can involve. I know that Werner worked on solar project that was quite successful. I believe it was solar, right, Werner? Getting individual homeowners to sign up, or reducing carbon footprint through homeowner buy-in. And also Jesse Gray, who's on the ZIAB, who's a ZIAB chair, has put energy source heat beneath the ground. I can't say the name of it right now. Anyway, he's done that individually. So there are other resources. There's the private sector, which is possible, and then the public sector. And I think we should be doing both, but being with taking important landscapes and leaving them off the table personally. That's my opinion.
I'm just going to jump in and say, Mary, I couldn't agree more in terms of we need open space in Brookline, and we already have this, enormous array of buildings that we can be using as a palette for solar. So yeah, I would hate to see us take away our limited open space. I posted in the chat, Tom, something that might be of interest. You may already know about it, but what I was orienting towards was less community solar, meaning like one large array, and more looking to see how the town might work to create opportunities for community-based rooftop solar. So I shared one example that I know from living in Philadelphia, where the city played a role in negotiating a program that residents had access to, and it had a very specific focus around equity. And I know you mentioned that, so it might be something you'd want to look at.
Most definitely, and I brought that up in conversations over the last year or so too. Again, it becomes a question of sort of bandwidth, but it's definitely something we're looking at.
Susan, yellow hand.
So I was just going to say that the town did do a solarized Brookline program a few years ago, and I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but a lot of us went around to houses that were good candidates, because they had good, south-facing roofs, and shared information, and some people did take it up, but it was a program, I think, similar and to what you're talking about in Solarize Philly, and maybe we can do it again.
David, let's go. Yay. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Just respond to that quickly. Mass is no longer supporting Solarize, at least currently. I don't know why. No one will give me a straight answer. So that may be something on your legislative end that you want to sort of prompt people. Again, they may be waiting for the next governor to come in and see what happens, but that's definitely something that we need some buy-in to give us some sort of additional support from the state side. And I have an RFP for Solarize anything in my desk. So anytime I want to do, we could do it independently if we wanted to, without the sort of backing from an MAPC or the state. But that would, again, take a lot of bandwidth and effort, but I can do it if you want me to.
Tom, and I'm
Okay.
sorry, just very quickly, what is the limitation? Is the limitation funding, or is the limitation finding available sites for that solar you're talking about?
Time.
Time. Got it.
Time.
Got
Okay.
it. Got it. David Lascoya, yellow hand.
Okay, yes. Okay, so a number of things about putting some solar on the golf course and worrying about golf balls. Golf ball wouldn't really do much damage to a solar panel. I remember when we did our 47 kilowatts on this condo, the electricians were walking over the panel, say, "Oh my God, what are they doing?" And then I looked into it a bit. They're built to stand like a 1-inch hail. So I mean, just as a point of information, they're very strong, they're very resilient, and I don't think the golf ball hitting them would be a problem. And I think you should definitely look into that. We did have, after the Solarize, another effort, community shared solar, and we ran up against the lack of land. And but it doesn't have to be in Brookline, actually, it just has to be within the load zone. But I understand that now the rules have changed, legislation has come through, and all of the land in Massachusetts would be a candidate for a community shared solar project for Brookline. So maybe it is time to go back and revisit it. Some of the constraints that we were facing at that time have been eliminated. And it may be possible to partner with someone who's building a large array somewhere and offtake some of that for participants in Brookline. I know that my brother is doing it in Illinois, so it is happening, and I think that Massachusetts is joining in that.
We can actually do it outside the state of Mass, as you know, from the conversations that we've had during the last negotiation process for other contracts, but that's something that we'll definitely revisit, and that's part of what I want to revisit on the the load for the municipal energy supply.
But this in community shared solar, you're talking about the actual participants owning and
Right.
and being able to retire the RECs. So that puts it in a little bit different category than those South Dakota kinds of things. But it could be, I mean, electrons don't care where they're going or where they came from.
Right.
So,
And I'll tell you, let me mention very briefly, I do remember before Werner, I'm sorry, David Lescoya, I do remember that when you, much more than I, were working on the CSA project, that there were certain plots of land that suddenly you had your eye on, but what would happen is they'd be in other towns in Massachusetts. And it seemed to me what was happening is that either that town itself or, I don't know, nearby towns or something grabbed it before Brookline could actually.
well, it was Chelmsford and
Yeah.
Chelmsford, and it was actually, it was, went to the planning board. I was there at the planning board meeting, and they had their own agenda going, and they just didn't give it a permit.
The town didn't give it a permit,
Yeah,
or
didn't
both
give
of
it
you,
Werner has details too. Yeah.
yeah, both of you are exactly right. It might be worth looking at again, but it was definitely a blind alley at that point. But David and I co-chaired that group that met for about a year, and we actually issued a written report at the end. So if there's someone here that wants to follow up on it, I'd be happy to send them the report.
Yeah.
And if I could just mention Blake Cady, who's been a very active CAB member for several years, unfortunately not here tonight. He has proposed that Brookline do a townwide LiDAR survey. He's noticed that in his part of town, there's an awful lot of, I guess, new building construction, maybe even McMansion construction with huge roofs. And he says he has not seen one that has had a PV array put on that roof. So his specific idea is a townwide LiDAR survey of the building rooftops in Brookline. So that can be used to assess which rooftops would be appropriate for photovoltaics given current prices.
And we had a warrant article a couple town meetings ago to allow for ground-mounted solar arrays in residential properties. So there's another avenue that's now open.
Okay, John Hermos, I believe you raised your hand. You're muted. John, unmute yourself.
Okay, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, first, any structure on Putterham that the ball would bounce back towards the fairway would be welcome. We have to think of in our application back to Paris and other fundraising on measurable and meaningful outcomes. I mean, in medicine, it would be, did you save lives? Or serious morbidities. I'm all in favor of planting hundreds and thousands of trees, but there's nothing measurable that's going to come of that other than we planted so many trees. We can't, the gold standard would be, did we reduce ambient temperature? And that's certainly impossible for a little organization like us. But we have to try and get close to that. Emissions, and I guess the best surrogate is fuel use. And I think anything the town does, whether it's with their fleet or whether it's with their buildings, can measure actual fuel use. And I think those are good surrogates. I don't know what we can do with traffic. I mean, if we wanted to have every kid ride a bike to school once a week, how would we measure that effect for a personal bike, reduction in car use of fuel? So I think anything we propose, there's certainly going to be some kumbaya outcomes, but on all the others, they certainly have to be measurable and relevant. And I think that's a challenge for a little town like us within the big picture of climate change.
John, just one idea that's been suggested lately in terms of EVs, moving people from fossil fuel cars to EVs, is if we can get the, because EVs have special license plates, right? And I believe as part of the registration, fuel use is perhaps, someone was saying. So, for example, how many EV license plates are there in town as the years go by? And what percentage of that compared to fossil fuel cars? That would be one way to measure that. So, Tom, you have ideas on that?
That big piece of data is elusive and has been very difficult to get. In fact, I had a conversation with the town clerk last week, and they're telling us that you've got to go to the DMV. And if they, at one point, the conversation was like, well, we'd have to pay for it, but I can't get an answer as to, well, how much is that? Is it like $1,000 or is it like, 100,000? I don't know. So I need to put a magnitude on that to see if we can get that data or get to the DMV and say, hey, look, we're a town, we're in the Commonwealth, we need the data. And, if we have to pay a nominal information fee for it, that's fine. But we still need the data one way or another. And if it's $100,000, that's ridiculous. So we need to figure that out.
Well, I'm sorry, Mary, let me just respond to this issue, which is that a few years ago when we were doing the Babcock Street separated cycle track campaign, unfortunately we lost, but as part of that, we asked, and Todd Corain was able to get the data, I'm sorry, from Massachusetts RMV in terms of the cars that were parking on Babcock Street itself. What towns were those cars registered in? We learned that a huge percentage were registered out of town, by the way, and so we think that basically people were parking on Babcock Street and getting on the subway to head into downtown Boston, kind of thing. So that was important in our campaign. But the point is, Todd was able to get that data. So Mary, sorry to keep you waiting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back at Rich Rosen's clarity about the percentage we have to cut every year and how CAB has wrestled off and on with how to set priorities within our organization. And the ideal, of course, is to take projects that have a big impact. I would like to review our conversation today in terms of, one, the impact of actions and somehow just understand them intuitively until we can get data on it. And then also figure out how we're going to follow up this conversation and figure out a way to work together. I so admire each of the organizations and the way we have now a planning department position, which took years to get. We suggested it years and years ago, and the politics of it just didn't line up until the Collins report, and Mel Kleckner got involved in that report. So maybe we need some kind of overarching vision that would help us get as quickly as possible to reduction actions that are not just meaningful to our organizations and important to individuals, but combine that with a plan. And now that we have ZIAB, I think we can begin to pull together somehow. I don't know. I just want to see if we get this done. Oh dear, yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, ZIAB is having its next meeting this Wednesday from 10 to 11 a.m. And the main item, or perhaps only item on the agenda, is there have been a number of home rule petition ideas that they're going to discuss. So, and Tom, once again, I interrupted you.
That's okay. You may think that there are other people who are way ahead, and if you look across the Commonwealth, everyone has some very successful projects or very successful legislation, as you guys in Brookline do in a number of different ways. But everybody is still kind of in the same boat. I was just at a conference last week where we had a whole bunch of communities together, including the state, DOER, and we were all talking during the lunchtime, and we're all kind of in the same sort of boat of like things are sort of happening fast. build the car as we go down the highway, or repair the train as we're going down the track. So everyone is in the same kind of mode. So there's nobody that has the real, magic key answer to the whole thing. So we're kind of inventing the process as we go and learning from each other as we do that. But the incremental steps that you've made and the successes that you've had, you need to make sure that we're building off of those. And I've done the same thing either in previous iterations of my environmental career, but at the same time, Amesbury, Mass, where I came from, was on the same trajectory as everybody. And then, new mayor got in and truncated the entire department. So that can happen too. I don't think that would happen in Brookline, but it can definitely happen and set yourself back. So I think you need to get some realistic goals and realistic projects behind us. So we need to figure out what we can do. It's not just the low-hanging fruit, but it's something that's going to make a difference, whether that's the electrification of the fleet, electrification of the buildings, all of which we're moving out on together. But at some point we need to figure out which one of these things in the individual nature is going to be a priority item and complete one, and say, okay, this is the model that we're gonna be, and this is the one that we've done to sort of demonstrate to everybody that we can do it.
Yeah, David, let's go. Yeah, I do see you have a yellow hand, and that might be a past yellow hand. So Mary, you have a yellow hand then.
Yeah, one of the things that we did for the DPW search for the new department of DPW, which Aaron Galentine is now serves in, was to include a requisite to have climate experience and to have a climate vision to bring to her department. And I'm wondering, this is divergent from what we're talking about, but we're getting everything out today. So
all ideas are good.
Can we also write a letter to whoever's, I guess, the select board, about putting in for a climate, somebody who understands climate, who's not, the money part is important, and the whole broad perspective of all the different things the town does, but we're in this climate emergency, and I think we can get a lot of weight into that position about climate somehow. Anyway, just a thought. Sorry to get divergent, but it came to me.
Yeah, and Mary, I think you're talking about the new town administrator hiring
Oh,
process.
sorry.
Yeah, and I can say that Jesse Gray, I am told, I get this second or third hand, is on that search committee. I believe that is the case. And
Well,
that is, of course, why he wanted to be on that.
The search committee is important. We can also collectively write letters from all of our groups and say how important it is and talk about climate emergency and back Jesse up, or make a strong statement so that when people, it's second nature, the town doesn't have to be reminded about this every time we have a search, that it becomes policy through a wise and experienced and climate oriented manager.
Fantastic idea.
Mary,
Don,
I'm just
yellow
gonna
hand.
jump. I would love to just say, Mary, there was a Mothers Out Front petition letter that was signed by hundreds of people, including many of the people on the call, and maybe even you, saying that the town really demanded a new town administrator would be a climate educated, climate prioritizing individual. So, there's been already an effort to speak on that towards the search team.
Good, great.
Fantastic, thank you. Don, yellow hand.
Yeah, just to second what Mary said, I just think it's crucial. This is a once in a generation event, getting a new town administrator, and it's going to determine a whole lot about priorities, about budgets and everything else. I mean, we may have to be moving to a new budget structure that includes this idea of money for the environment and climate the way we do for libraries and schools and so forth. That's a huge paradigm shift. And you've got to have somebody at the helm who is at least sympathetic to this way of thinking. So yeah, I mean, in terms of our collective efforts, I can't think of any single thing in terms of town government that's more important than getting a town administrator who is climate savvy.
I will say that Heather Hamilton did specifically speak to that when she met with Mothers Out Front relatively recently, that she was very well aware of the fact that this was a competency that the town needed, wanted, was asking for, and that it would be a priority in this process.
Fantastic. And on the part of CAB, let me just say, I mean, if any of the CAB folks want to kind of write an initial draft to get that possible CAB letter started, that would be fantastic. And Tom, once again, I interrupted you and I apologize again.
Always a pleasure to be interrupted by you. So one thing that you guys have all hit on is the need for an understanding of how the economics sort of work in the sort of budget cycle. And that's something I've been struggling with for a while. Back in the day when I had my own company, I had 2 or 3, PhD level economists on staff, because these questions need to be answered in a way that is not part of the routine and not part of the regular return on investment equation, which is kind of what we're stuck with. So if you go into a budget hearing, you go into a meeting, it's like, okay, what's the payback period of time? Well, it's like, it needs to be somewhere between 2 years and 10, otherwise you're kind of outside of the element. And this is really not something that's going to fit that model. So how to address that is something that we need to answer, and it's beyond my skill set. I'm a geologist and a chemist, so it's beyond my understanding of the basic economists. So we really need to figure out a different way to sort of inject something into those equations that's a little bit more solid than sort of doing the right thing. That's in there too, but it needs to go a little bit beyond that, so we can actually put some sort of framework around it to convince people that we really need this money.
And yellow hand. You're muted.
First, a response to Tom, and then another question, which is, first thought is, I think Brookline is second only to Berkeley, California, as the PhD capital of the country. And I know Mayim and John and us and many others in the town have access to people who are unbelievably intelligent, maybe retired, maybe still working in universities in the area. And I would encourage you to, pose a challenge like that and look to the town and its citizenry and its experts to help solve those challenges. I don't think that is a question that one of the, universities or colleges around here wouldn't be able to help answer and potentially love to do in the context of a classroom or a, PhD student project. So that was my first thing. And then the second is, that I asked a question in the chat. I'm wondering, just to clarify, is the expectation that you, Tom, will work with a consultant to create the climate action plan, or is the expectation that CAB is playing the lead role in creating the plan? Like, just process-wise, who is leading and initiating and actually creating this document based on hopefully data that Wendy and Ziab and others are pulling together?
So the shorter answer is all of us. So the construct of the MVP grant process and what I envisioned in my head even before I applied for the money is like, we need to run this like an MVP project, which involves the community directly. Without that, it's pretty much meaningless. So the way to do this is to, I don't think we need the full-blown summit that you had the last time, but definitely the involvement of all the groups that are here today and beyond to get the input. And how we break that down is something that we need to determine, but it's definitely something that I sort of baked into the sort of grant application as well. I think John Harris and I were talking about the working groups and trying to figure out what those specific working groups might be. And so that's something that would be an initial exercise to figure out, okay, here's how we're going to put this together and then move forward to develop the plan.
I think what Tom is referring to, just John Hermos, 1 second. I think what Tom is referring for working groups are the sustainability working teams or groups, whatever. There were about 8 or 9 of them that Zoe set up, and of which about 2/3 of them actually met. I know the transportation group met very regularly and came up with that fantastic 2019 warrant article 31 that changed the town's transportation priorities from the highest priority in town was of our roads was from the movement of cars and trucks to the movement of people and goods, which was a fantastic change, which met much more prioritizing pedestrians, bicyclists, et cetera, however people get themselves and their possessions moved from place to place. There is still in existence a list of the members of all of those working teams. And boy, I'm in favor of reviving any and all of them that still have relevance and that people are still interested in. And John Hermos, I'm sorry, in this case, I interrupted you.
That's right, quite all right. I really like Don Weitzman's suggestion. For example, every budget proposal could include a section saying, how does your budget address the issue of climate change, whether it's the library or the police or the veterans or whatever, cause to force every department to include in some way something in their budget request that directs itself towards climate, towards energy efficiency, in many ways, the many things they do. That wouldn't be very difficult to add to a budget application. I don't know by what means it can be done, but it would really, force department heads to think about this.
Don, yellow hand.
Yeah, this dovetails with one recommendation from the Collins report that hasn't been implemented yet. And Tom, I don't know how you feel about this, but the notion of I'm not even sure what it's called, but a collaborative committee of department heads and so forth that prioritizes climate. And you would obviously be playing a very key role there. Any progress on this? Do you see this happening? Do you think it's worth happening? Because it fits directly into this whole budget conversation.
Yeah, I'm trying. I tried sort of individual meetings when I first started. Obviously, you got to know the lay of the land, try to figure out who's who. And then I moved to a more formal one where we're trying to get together at least once a month as the sort of the upper level department folks to try to sort of talk about this stuff. And been moderately successful trying to get everybody's attention. But I think that will start to change. I think, again, looking at what may morph as we move into a new administrator, because I think we were looking for the administrator to play a key role in that integration, because it definitely needs to come from sort of the top down at that point. It can't be me sort of pounding on everybody's door as much as I do that. So I think the next administrator, I think, is definitely going to have to open those pathways up a little bit more than I already have.
Mary, yellow hand.
Yeah, just to build on what John Hermos said, maybe we can begin to work on the select board and the advisory committee to talk about the budgeting and the climate presence in all departments in their budgets. I think that's a possible really strong angle to begin to whittle away. And we have Ziab and Tom inside the town, and we as advocates can write these letters coming from Mothers Outcome, coming from Elders Climate Action, coming from CAB, and get a public movement going on that.
And I'll tell you, building on that, it's there's another, when you think about it, I mean, if this kind of conversation gets going, there's another group, perhaps we could say related, the EJ group, the diversity group, the equity people in town, and that leads directly to the concept of what is called the triple bottom line, I think. Those folks would want, which is us EJ people, also would want those concerns incorporated into all this thinking as well. I would personally be interested in working on this, and I wonder if it's now 6:44, and I wonder if we can, maybe several attendees would be willing to commit to energy on this particular project.
Don, can you say what this is?
The notion of incorporating at least climate concerns in the town's budgeting process.
Tom, is that something that would be useful? Tom Barrasso?
Yes, I think it definitely would. And just to clarify, it's not the fact that people are uninterested in this topic or do not support it. it's again, the bandwidth question. When each department has their own mission and their own focus. So I'm trying to come in and sort of orchestrate it into where at least things are funneling through me so that we can get some of the sort of climate activities and projects and messaging across to all the things that are going on. But again, it becomes a bandwidth issue of like, you got to salt the roads, you got to build something, you got to take care of some of these immediate concerns, whether the building's too cold, the building's too hot, or something's broken. And so that's where the focus usually ends up. But this would, having a sort of budget discussion exercise where that lens is definitely built in more so than what I did during the last review of the CIP, I think would definitely be something that would be worthwhile, especially if we could then establish it's like, well, you've got X number of things in your fleet, you need to cut that by this particular date. I think that would really drive home the way the mechanics would work.
Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe you could organize I mean, I don't know about the timing of this or how it would be presented. Maybe it's working one-on-one with departments, but maybe have some kind of climate summit with, I mean, I'm using that term loosely, but a climate meeting with all the departments, and to, once the new executive, the new town manager person gets in, who hopefully has a climate perspective, to organize a meeting and bring this to fruition of the conversation, start the conversation and figure out a path, a goal and a path.
I'm just wondering if, given what Tom has just said, that all of the town department heads, and I suspect every town employee is already very, very busy as it is. I just wonder if maybe this initiative is something that groups like the three of our groups here might want to kind of take the lead on and work with the new town administrator. That also provides that gives a clear indication of townspeople's priorities, which takes some of the risk of that off of the, shoulders of town employees that may not want to feel they're getting out over their skis, as they say. So do we generally have a sense that this is something that we all might want to work on? We've talked about a number of ideas, but I see some folks nodding their heads.
I'm not sure that it's something that Mothers Out Front would necessarily work on. I can't speak on behalf of the group. We'll have a whole process of deciding what our priorities are and what our strategy is for next year and where people want to allocate their time.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Well, we do have quite a few CAB board members here, and that it's good that we've heard all of these ideas. And this meeting is being recorded. So how are we doing? It is now 6:47. We've been meeting almost 2 hours now. We've had a number of good ideas generated, and we will have more meetings like this. CAB will organize with including some of the many other groups that do climate related work, as I said before. And this meeting has been recorded. And so I know that a number of folks who couldn't make it have asked to want to have access to that recording, and we'll make that available. Mayim I see the chat. I feel CAB should definitely get involved in the hiring of a new town administrator. Definitely hear that. So I think we got some good ideas generated, and let's all ruminate them and start talking amongst ourselves about them. And Seth, I would encourage the group to ask questions about whether budget-specific question is. I lost the last of that chat there, but
that's okay. I'm basically saying, before jumping in and saying, let's write a bunch of letters asking the town staff to be required to put in climate related information about on their budget, like ask the question to say, is this the right lever to pull? Is this the right place to take action? It may be the most, the best one, but I guess I'm just saying, ask questions and listen before just deciding to, aim all the arrows in that direction.
Little note of caution there. Well taken. So, okay, I think we've got some fantastic ideas generated, a lot for all of us to think about. Does anybody have any final questions or comments before we call it a day for today? Thank you, Olivia. And the next CAB meeting, always the second Monday, which in July will be Monday, July 11. So just keep that in mind. Topic as yet undecided, ideas still being solicited. Let us know if you have an idea. And Mayim.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, John and others. Thank you.
Thank you, John H.
Someone back along the way mentioned, like, we just need to plant a bunch more trees. I mean, people have really been thinking about these ideas closely. Planting new trees now doesn't change anything until like the end of the century. But we need to be very careful of what trees we have. And I recently found out about the process in Newton that when there is a request for a tree removal, if somebody writes an objection to whoever it is in the town, then they cannot cut the tree at that time. They have to handle that objection. And I realized, I don't know what the process is in Brookline. Do we have that kind of safeguard in Brookline? Because trees are still getting cut down, and planting seedlings, nothing compared to saving a mature tree that's on the job.
Mayim, your Newton, is that on, in Newton, is that trees on private property or public property? Do you happen to know?
Let me get out of here and I'll go take a look and see
That's
if I
okay.
can find the answer to that.
That's a critical issue, and I can tell you that is the kind of question that the Brookline Green Space Alliance deals with all the time. And
Right.
Olivia, I think you're on the MOF tree group. Have you folks been working on that particular issue? You're muted, Olivia.
There's not that kind of protection here in Brookline.
Yes, I'm told the only, right now, thank you for verifying what I have been told, not officially, but second or third hand, is that the only, on private property, the only protection, the way that somebody could try to prevent someone from cutting down a tree on private property is if they can make a compelling stormwater, kind of rationale. It's very often too little too late. People can cut down their trees on private property in almost every situation without any notice to anybody, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Brookline does have a tree warden. There is a tree warden, Tom Brady. So that's probably good questions for him.
Yes, good idea. Good idea.
Yeah, it's within a certain amount of width. If you want to cut down a tree that's a certain amount of width at chest height, you can do so, but you need a permit to do it, and you need to be able to submit a plan as to how you're going to landscape your property in order to replace what you're taking down. It doesn't matter how you are going to do it. You just have to submit the plan. So it basically slows the process of cutting down trees. However, as we've seen throughout town, they are getting cut down left, right, and center. So I think it's something that we definitely need to think about. It's something that our tree team is thinking about, how to protect these large trees, because the larger the tree, the greater the carbon sink benefits and cooling benefits. So it's a real loss to the town to lose these big trees. And a lot of what we think we've been talking about with trees and also with everything here today, I would love to address with the planning board. I mean, a lot of this is, if we're going to build new, we need to build in order to allow space for tree growth, but also for solar panel and also for, greener construction. It's all around. So I'm wondering if that's really where the focus needs to be, but I'm no expert on this. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and honestly, my understanding is, in terms of the permits that, Olivia, that you're saying are required, my understanding is those the consideration of the trees is only after a construction permit has been filed, and that what a lot of property owners do, and perhaps developers as well, is, okay, cut down the trees and then file the permit. I think I've seen several lots where that has actually been done. Susan, yellow hand.
So I just wanted to say that I think it's time for us to wind this up. And thank you to everybody who came. I'm going to stop the recording at this point, and I will let you know where and when it will be available.
All right.